B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Wednesday, January 15, 2020. Note to self, write those big checks to the taxman in Sacramento and Washington. Mail them out today, will you? And that's a reminder to any self-employed American, our quarterly tax payments are due. I've got some comments on the Democratic debate in Iowa last night, the ceremonies in Washington today that formally triggered the impeachment trial in the Senate that will begin formally next week. And I have to apologize to listeners. I'm recording the podcast later than usual, and the last 2 hours have just been one technical nightmare after another for me. I'll explain briefly that I have a Macintosh computer that I use for posting the podcast, and it's also what I use to research and print out articles. And in the middle of printing out my stack today, the printer shut down the computer, and when I tried to log back in, it didn't recognize my password. And so I was totally locked out and frustrated. I dashed over to my nearby Apple store, and I want to thank the genius, or whatever they call the technicians there now, a guy named Waren, who in short order was able to clear my short-term RAM and get the computer operational. So I zipped back to the office, and I tried to print out the articles that I need to complete the podcast, and the printer threw up 4 different challenges to me. So I'm working really with one or more hands tied behind my back today. But I want to begin by talking about the craven way that CNN and its moderators conducted the Iowa debate last night. It was clear from the beginning that Bernie Sanders, who is now in some polls number 1 in Iowa and New Hampshire and trending upward nationally, that he was the target du jour. And since, for the most part, fellow candidates didn't attack each other, their goal was to come away without making a mistake or, in Joe Biden's case, multiple gaffes. And the 7 candidates mostly achieved that. But CNN's bias was so clear from so many different angles. And let me thank Mark Taylor Canfield. He's one of my friends on Facebook, and he shared photos from a guy named Nick who took pictures of his TV screen as the debate was underway. And CNN, the other networks that carry these debates don't always do this, but CNN, programs to airports and other places where the sound is off, so they love to put a headline in text up on the screen. So, here's the text that says, question. Waren supports a new trade deal with Mexico and Canada. Why is Sanders' opposition to it wrong? That's an obviously loaded question. Waren is right. Sanders is wrong. Just tell us why. Another one from this screenshot. Sanders' proposals would double federal spending over a decade. How will he avoid bankrupting the country? And the assumptions in that 2-line text summary of the question is that, of course, he will bankrupt the country with Medicare for all and free college tuition at public universities. Never a thought about cutting spending at the Defense Department or, God forbid, raising taxes on the rich anchors and their bosses at CNN. The Intercept, Ryan Grimm, Ada Chavez, and Akela Lacey did a great summary of the CNN transgressions. Headline, at the Iowa debate, Bernie Sanders' most vociferous opponent was CNN. They describe how CNN moderators brought out the bat and swung it hard at Senator Bernie Sanders. And in contrast, former Vice President Joe Biden was barely touched, either by moderators or his rivals. Now, the most egregious is going to be the soundbite, the video clip that will be used to represent this debate. And we need to understand, I've been talking about this the last couple of days, but on a calculated basis, Elizabeth Warren began on Sunday attacking Sanders by saying that his volunteers had been given a script that trashes Senator Waren. We've been over that the last 2 days. It was a legitimate contrast between the appeal, the voter appeal of Sanders and Waren, and her newfound sensitivity was calculated and strategic. And then somebody, presumably in the Waren campaign, leaked information about a private dinner that Waren and Sanders had in late 2018 when they agreed or they discussed that both of them were going to run for president. And Senator Waren alleges that in that exchange, Bernie Sanders told her that a woman couldn't win. Now, as I said yesterday, this is very far-fetched. I can imagine that Sanders said things like, well, you know, Trump's got that Pocahontas thing going, and it might be hard for you to win. And there are many other variations of that I can conceive surfaced in such a conversation. So, this so-called information was leaked to CNN, and they now admit that they have two primary sources from the Waren campaign who said that Elizabeth told them this shortly after the dinner with Bernie, and two others who heard it from somebody else. So fundamentally, it's all hearsay because there are only two people in the room. But CNN got the story through a leak, and then they got Elizabeth Warren to confirm her version of the story, while she said she didn't want to talk about it anymore. Now that the stink bomb had been detonated, she wanted to hold her nose and move on. So Abby Phillip, one of the CNN reporters who co-anchored the debate, she said, CNN reported yesterday, and Senator Warren has confirmed in a statement that in 2018 you told her that you did not believe a woman could win the election. Why did you say that? So this assumes that the CNN reporting is unassailable, even though it was based on leaks, and then confirmed by one of the people who would gain advantage from the reporting of this story. And from there, it is treated as fact. Now, after the debate, in a kind of mini spin session with 7 or 8 CNN anchors, we'll detail their names a little later, Anderson Cooper did say, well, wait a minute, it is a he said, she said. And then it appeared that his earpiece told him to change the subject. Another loaded question was about this new trade deal with Mexico that Trump is touting. And everybody acknowledges that it's not as bad as NAFTA. But Bernie is opposed to it. Warren says that she'll vote for it and then work for better trade deals down the line. And so the question was asked by a female reporter from the Des Moines Register. Aren't moderate improvements better than no improvements? Are you unwilling to compromise? So even the nominal outsider, the non-CNN employee, was on the same page, very biased and asking these loaded and leading questions of Sanders. And then it was Wolf Blitzer, of course, the former flak for AIPAC. His loaded question was, Iran's Ayatollah has again called for all U.S. troops to be pulled out of the Middle East, something you've called for as well. That is an obvious smear, and it's not the first time that Wolf Blitzer has done that. Now, CNN also asked Sanders if he thought he owed voters an explanation on how much his health plan would cost them, and demanded to know how he will avoid bankrupting the country. And on trade, Elizabeth Warren was questioned about a new deal with Canada and asked, why is Sanders' opposition to it wrong? Here's a tweet from Cenk Uygur, who is running for Congress in Southern California, framing on every question as massively right-wing. They just accuse Sanders of bankrupting the country when his proposal costs less than the current system. How come they don't ask Biden if he's comfortable with letting 45,000 people a year die under the current system? I'm quoting this is now Mint Press I'm reading, Alan McLeod's account. CNN continually framed issues in a conservative manner, accepting right-wing talking points as true and attacking the left. And McLeod counted. CNN asked 27 questions about the American military presence in the Middle East without even once considering how the U.S. would pay for these wars. And then he cites Blitzer's smear of Sanders, saying that he and the Ayatollah both want U.S. troops out of the Middle East. So these are classic tactics. CNN views itself as a gatekeeper, a filter. They're trying to protect America from the dangers posed by the surging candidacy of Bernie Sanders. And they want to try to snuff it out here. And get this. This is the conservative paper from Boston, the Herald, said it is the classical political dirty trick from a desperate candidate. Leak a damaging tidbit about your opponent to a friendly media outlet, wait for the fireworks to explode, then act like you're the one who's been wronged. And Waren tried to act like she was above it all. She wasn't going to get in the mud with Bernie, and so she shifted to a rehearsed talking point that all of the men on the stage together had lost a total of 10 elections, and that she and Amy Klobuchar have never lost an election. Now, Warren's only run twice. The second was a cakewalk. The first was against the guy whose name I can't remember. He's a Republican who served one term in the Senate. He'd been in Playgirl magazine, and he was a pretty much useless guy. So that, I'm sure, plays well with many partisans for Elizabeth Warren. But the damage that she has done to the prospect of Bernie Sanders voters supporting her, either as a vice presidential pick or, in the event Bernie doesn't win the nomination, as a second choice, those were both seriously set back by this desperate move by Senator Warren. Now, quoting a piece from Caitlin Johnstone, the hashtag CNN is trash is the #1 trend on Twitter due to the network's appalling treatment of Sanders in last night's debate in Iowa. She cites the questions that we've raised before about smearing him by linking him to Ayatollah Khamenei, and also the bankrupt to the country question. And Johnstone's take is that Ms. Phillip, the CNN reporter, brought up a transparently ridiculous claim that was leaked to the press and confirmed by Warren that Sanders had told her he didn't believe a woman could win a presidential election. It's a completely unproven allegation about an unwitnessed private conversation. Yet Phillip didn't ask Sanders if he had said such a thing. She asked him why he said it. And even after he denied it, she continued. So, first of all, it's an irrelevant point. The idea that Sanders told Warren that a woman couldn't win. Number one, I don't think Bernie said it. As I speculated before, I think he may have said something about how tough it would be for a woman to beat Trump because he's willing to be so lowbrow. And even Van Jones got into it. His line was that there was a banana peel sitting out there for Bernie to slip on, and he actually slipped on it. Well, CNN placed that banana peel, figuratively, on the stage by creating this controversy and then exploiting it during the debate. And I actually witnessed this right after the debate. They did a quick run with David Axelrod and Van Jones and CNN's Jess McIntosh. And she seemed to be talking to management because she was promoting the Warren claim as fact. Quoting Johnstone, overtly dismissing Sanders' denial, saying, I think what Bernie forgot was that this isn't a he said, she said story. This is a reported out story that CNN was part of breaking. So to have him just flat out say no, I think wasn't nearly enough to address that for the women watching. And that's where Anderson Cooper said, well, it really was he said, she said. And my estimation of him climbs by 1/2 inch, and that's not saying so much. So this was a really sordid debate, and CNN staged it, I think intentionally, to try to shake up the race and either to make room for Mike Bloomberg or to promote their idea of a Joe Biden presidency. And since I mentioned Bloomberg, I did catch Trevor Noah's Daily Show last night, and he had some cracking commentary. I'll give him credit for that. But at the end of his first segment, they had a produced little spot that was built on the premise that Mike Bloomberg will spend so much money that he will control every television channel 24/7. And it was a great joke, a great premise. And if you haven't seen it yet, look it up on your computer or your phone, because I thought it was quite funny. But, we've seen that Tom Steyer spent the most on TV in North Carolina and Nevada, and that's what enabled him to meet the standards to be on the debate stage last night. Now, Steyer did comport himself well. I still don't see him as a candidate with a broad-based appeal. But his talk about climate change, which is strong but vague, he doesn't specify, other than declaring a national emergency on day one of a Steyer presidency, what he would actually do about it. And when he talked about his foreign policy chops, it was about how, as he built his billionaire fortune, he spent a lot of time traveling the world and meeting with business and political leaders. Here's some of the comments about Steyer's performance from the assembled minds on the opinion page of the New York Times. Jorge Castaneda, decisive on issues like impeaching Trump and climate change. He was unable to break through on other issues. Gail Collins, we have a better billionaire. Ross Douthat, his best night, don't roll your eyes. Maureen Dowd, she's always snarky. Let's listen. Steyer pressed his case that he is the one to take on corporate America, given that he's already wrung $1 billion out of the economy. But if we have to listen to a rich guy, let's hear what Mike Bloomberg has to say. She's already tipped her hand that she thinks he would be a good Democratic candidate. Now to the formal commentary in the New York Times. Quoting, prompted by moderators, Waren and Sanders continued a back and forth over the fraught subject of whether a woman could be elected president. And they don't really detail how the story surfaced. They quote her rehearsed line about collectively these men have lost 10 elections. Now, she ignores the fact that Tom Steyer's never run for anything, so he couldn't fit that particular bill. They continue. Sanders flatly denied that he had made the comment. He said it was incomprehensible that I would think that a woman couldn't be president of the United States, and he cited Hillary's victory in the popular vote in 2016. This part's accurate. Biden came under far less scrutiny than his standing as the national frontrunner might have merited in the final debate before the Iowa caucuses, Feb. 3. Pete Buttigieg, the former mayor of South Bend, who has slipped in Iowa, seemed satisfied to make his own case without sharply criticizing his rivals. Now, one of the photo ops that will also survive from this debate was after it was concluded, the candidates were milling about the stage, sharing handshakes with one another, and Sanders intentionally went up to Waren. You could see that he took the initiative. He extended his hand to her, and she withdrew hers. They then appeared to have some sharp words, and the video also shows that, as usual, Bernie was using his hands and pointing a little bit, and I'm sure that a screenshot of a freeze frame of that will be circulated to make it look like he's pointing a finger and lecturing her because he is a sexist, misogynist pig. And I really regret that this campaign, this process has descended in this manner. And it reminds me of what happened in February of 2016 when the partisans for Hillary in the caucuses in Nevada created a ruckus and later claimed that a Bernie supporter had thrown a chair. Now, the video later showed that a Bernie supporter picked up a chair and then put it down. He didn't throw it. No one was hurt. And Rachel Maddow, since that footage wasn't helpful to her false narrative, she went and used file footage from a World Wrestling Federation or WWE event where folding chairs were actually thrown. And it was used to buttress the Bernie Bro meme. And that's coming out this time, and they're trying to make Bernie the bro. It's really underhanded. And to see the collusion between Waren, her campaign, and CNN, it's disgusting. And now to the impeachment trial of Donald J. Trump. The House took the final step today. In a vote along party lines, only one Democrat defected. They approved the articles of impeachment and the House managers, the attorneys, who will act as prosecutors in the case. And tomorrow, in a ceremonial move, the managers will walk across the rotunda of the Capitol and deliver the articles to the office of the Senate. Now, over at the White House, they staged some counter-programming, and we'll get to that in a moment. But they're also sending out very positive spun messages. Senior officials said the House vote to approve the managers was long overdue, and it would be extraordinarily unlikely for the ensuing Senate trial that they say will vindicate the president to take longer than 2 weeks. Now, this trial is inconvenient for the presidential campaign. There are 4 Democratic senators. You know, Warren, Klobuchar, and Sanders, but the 4th is Michael Bennet of Colorado, who is still, for some reason, a presidential candidate, and all 4 of them will be chained to their seats in the Senate 6 days a week until the conclusion of this trial. But the idea that it will only take 2 weeks suggests that the Senate will vote to block witnesses and evidence. And the Democrats upped the ante today by releasing documents from Lev Parnas. You remember him. He's one of Rudy Giuliani's gophers. And I haven't had time to read those yet, so I'll delve into the contents of that in tomorrow's podcast. But the Democrats are doing everything they can to show that new evidence has emerged since the House took its vote on December 18. And I still am bitter that the Democrats have not included the Michael Cohen crimes, the cover-up of the bimbo payoffs, and the fact that Trump wrote checks for that cover-up while he was in the White House. It allows the Republicans to, they haven't even alleged a crime. Well, obstruction is a crime, and the Republican obstruction that has prevented witnesses to be called to the House in the previous proceeding, that has blocked virtually all documents, that is the real crime. And, of course, the Republicans simply deny it. So tomorrow morning is when they will do the walkover. And tomorrow afternoon, Thursday, we're expecting Chief Justice John Roberts to swear in the senators. And then after the Martin Luther King holiday on Monday, the Senate will convene in trial starting on Tuesday. Colin Peterson of Minnesota, a nominal Democrat, was the only one who joined every Republican in voting no in today's House proceedings. So the managers, not really a surprise on the leaders, Adam Schiff, who led the Intelligence Committee inquiry, and then Gerald Nadler, he chairs the House Judiciary Committee. He, of course, presided over the second stage. Along with them, Zoe Lofgren, who is a congresswoman from San Jose, Silicon Valley. I've known her since she went to the House. She is a solid person. She was on Judiciary during the Clinton proceedings, impeachment proceedings, and also was a House staff member during the Nixon impeachment process. The team also includes combat veteran Jason Crow of Colorado, African-American former police chief from Florida, Val Demings, Sylvia Garcia of Texas, who said she only found out yesterday she's going to be one of the managers. That doesn't seem so smart. And Hakeem Jeffries, former prosecutor from the greater New York City area. Also, these documents that I referred to about Lev Parnas, here's a quick summary. They contain a series of exchanges between him and the Ukrainian prosecutor Lutsenko, who is helping Giuliani unearth damaging information about the Bidens. And one of these damaging documents appears to be a threat from Lutsenko that he wouldn't cough up what he knew about Biden until they fired Marie Yovanovitch, the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. The documents also include a May 2019 letter from Giuliani requesting a meeting with President Zelensky of Ukraine, in which he said Trump had knowledge and consent of his actions. That directly implicates the president. So there's going to be a game that's played over this. Ted Cruz has floated what's called a reciprocity proposal in the Senate, saying that, well, if we allow the Democrats to call witnesses like John Bolton or what's his name? The acting chief of staff of the White House, well, I'm sorry. I don't have his name in front of me, and my mind is going in many different directions. You know who he is. Anyway, I believe there are other witnesses the Democrats should be calling as well, but the idea is the trade-off would be that they would push for testimony from Hunter Biden, perhaps Joe Biden, and they've even talked about putting Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi up as witnesses based on the idea that this whole thing is a hoax and that they have perpetrated it. Here's a surprise. The Prime Minister of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, has abruptly resigned shortly after Putin sent the country's political elite into a swirl, says the New York Times, with proposals for sweeping constitutional changes that could make him a president for life or at least extend term limits. I guess he's trying to keep up with Xi Jinping and the aspirations of Donald Trump. We'll be following that to see where it goes. And also, the counter-programming I mentioned over at the White House today, Trump knew that he was on TV and competing with the coverage of the House, so he took forever to introduce all the people who were there at the meeting as he signed a document. It's really mostly a press release announcing that Phase 1 of the negotiations with China have been complete. But I consider this just to be window dressing. China has committed to purchase an additional $200 billion worth of American goods and services by the end of next year and is expected to ease some of the tariffs it's placed on American products. But Trump is continuing to maintain $360 billion worth of let me put it this way, tariffs on $360 billion worth of Chinese imports, and they are continuing, he says, to negotiate over cybersecurity, China's controls on how companies handle data, and some other issues. But they're making it clear that they don't expect this to be resolved before the November election. And Trump had said, this is going to be a cakewalk. I'm going to bring China to its knees, and then they're just going to capitulate. And that is far from reality. And just one more item. The Washington Post is reporting that last week, Germany, France, and Britain decided to trigger the dispute mechanism in the JCPOA, that's the nuclear deal with Iran. But it appears they were prodded by a threat from Trump, once again, around tariffs. They say if they refuse to call out Tehran and initiate an arcane dispute mechanism in the deal, the U.S. would impose a 25% tariff on European automobiles. And one expert, a member of the European Union, said that this is like extortion, a new level of hardball tactics with America's oldest allies. And this, again, suggests to me that Trump hasn't been restrained at all by the Ukraine investigation and the impeachment that has followed. And it also suggests that the unproven reports that I have cited here over the past week, suggesting that Trump was threatening the Prime Minister of Iraq and that the threats included having him executed. And while I don't have evidence to support those reports, They sure seem mighty consistent with the behavior that we do know about. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. You're free to share it all over the place. You'll find it on YouTube. And I'm Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.